Well, hi again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football, and this is the Sports Page with Bob Case. And today we have a very special guest, someone that Bob has known since the mid-'70s, someone that I got to watch in the mid-'70s as well, played for the Los Angeles Dodgers, but also the St. Louis Cardinals, and started his career with Boston and the Red Sox. Went to a World Series with them, got to meet with Ted Williams on occasion, played with Carl Yastrzemski and Tony Conigliaro, and maybe even a little Bernie Carbo there, some Louis Tiant when he was a young man, and we are delighted to have Reggie Smith with us today. And Bob, you've known Reggie, gosh, going back to the later part of the 70s. There was some big hair back then, a lot of disco, a lot of light blue with white lapel homecoming, prom, and suits that people wore, but a guy that really played baseball with everything that he had. He was a lunch pail guy, blue collar the whole way, at least in terms of his baseball aspirations, and it's a joy for us to have him. So thank you, Bob, for bringing us Reggie Smith here today.
Yeah, it's my honor, and thank you, Reggie, for joining us. It's really, all my friends were all excited about watching Reggie, but, what a player. I mean, I first met Reggie at a Pasadena Star News in 1977. He was there half of 76, but before the season, they had a thing where they honored the Dodgers, and he sat at my table, and a class guy. And I followed his career because one of my favorite, he was not only a great guy, but a character. And I always told you I like characters, was Chet Brewer, and Reggie was part of that. Chet Brewer, I call them the All-Stars. And I'm going to let Reggie tell you when he talks about all the players that they came through and if you look at Reggie's career, I mean, what an amazing career. I think he's when I say underrated, he's not underrated. Everybody in baseball knows, but he should, it's like he still should, he's definitely a borderline Hall of Famer, if not a Hall of Famer. I mean, the guy won a Gold Glove. He did everything. He was an all-around player. He led the league in doubles. He was hit 300 on many different occasions. Did everything. Had a beautiful swing. I was telling my friends, I could shut my eyes and I still see Reggie swinging, especially from the left side. What a beautiful swing he had, and it was like one of those kind of Ken Griffey, Ted Williams swings that you don't forget. There's very few players, all the players I've watched, where you can shut your eyes and you visualize their swing, and that's what I can do with Reggie. So. And I always said he was the difference maker with the Dodgers. He got him in 3 World Series and won the 81 World Series, which was terrific, and played in the 67 World Series. And Tony Conigliaro, his teammate, was one of my dear, dear friends. And I'm going to tell Reggie one story, and then I'm going to let Reggie talk. But this is a funny story that he'll appreciate about Tony Conigliaro. I met Tony in spring training in 64, and he was a rookie, and I was the visiting clubhouse guy for the Angels, and they played in Palm Springs. So we'd go out, and we started hanging out. So when the Red Sox came to LA, Gene Autry owned a hotel on the Sunset Strip called the Continental Hotel, and the Red Sox stayed there. So I went down with Tony one night, and he was rooming with a guy named Jim Gosger, a little guy who was an outfielder, and he said, "Let's go get have a beer." So we went across the street to a strip club called the Body Shop on Sunset Boulevard, and we sat in there and we had pitchers of beer. Now this is the weirdest. Tony, every day he saw me till the day he passed, he said, "You remember that sick F word that we met?" Now listen to this. We're in there, Gosger, myself, and Tony, and some guy walked, and all the waitresses knew these were Red Sox players. Some guy walked in a Red Sox hat, and I said, "Sir, are you a Red Sox fan?" Because you didn't see guys wearing baseball hats in teams back then in '64. "Yes, I am." I said, "Let me ask you something. Have you heard of this new sensational rookie for the Red Sox named Tony Conigliaro?" And he goes, "Well, yeah." I said, "I coached him all through Little League." He said, "I coached him, and Tony's looking at me. He doesn't know this guy." And so I kept stroking him. I said, "So where did you? Oh, he went to Swamps. He's from Swampscott, Mass, and he went to St. Mary's High School, and he's telling me all the story. And I knew his younger brother Billy, and he's going through the whole thing. And every time I would ask him a question, it was like the E.F. Hutton commercial. Everything would stop, and all the waitresses would listen to me asking the guy the story. So after about an hour and a half of drinking beers and everything, I said to this guy, "Oh, what was your name again?" I forget what his name was, but let's say it was John. I said, "John, I'm so sorry. You're a Red Sox fan. I forgot to introduce you to this is Jim Gosger and Tony Conigliaro." and all the people in the place got up and clapped, and this guy almost fainted. You know what I mean? But I mean, it was just, and Tony's, and why would he say that? What? If I was a woman who's trying to hit on me and impress me, I could understand it. But why would he tell just a couple of guys that he coached them in Little League? I mean, you just never know about people. You learn. It was unbelievable. Tony never forgot it his whole life. With that Boston accent, he'd always say, "Bob, remember that sick? You know what we saw in the lecture." But anyway,
you probably met a few of them in your day, haven't you, Reggie? Some folks that say, "Oh yeah, I know Reggie Smith. I did something, way back when." I don't have the slightest idea who you are.
I've had a few, and I would play along with them, and they'd ask, you look like him. I said, yeah, he's my brother. But anyway, that story you're talking about with Tony there in '64. We were in spring training together there, and we both hit well over 400.
Oh, he was.
But they kept him and sent me out, and well, they should have, because I wasn't ready yet, and Tony was a few months older than me, and from being from Boston, so they kept him, and they sent me out because I hadn't turned 19 yet. He was 19 already, and I was still 18 at the time. But we were in spring training and in together, and I can remember being in the hotel, especially down in Palm Springs there, and so you telling that story there about Tony. Well, he was something special, and being able to hit that ball. He was one of those guys that later on in my years of coaching, you could always tell who was hitting, and you didn't have to see them by the sound of the ball coming off of the bat. It had that ring, and Ted Williams used to talk about it because that's the first time that I met Ted was in the spring training of 1964, and I'll tell you the story about how much it helped me because you talked about my swing and everything. It was something watching him and some things that he said that allowed me to develop and stay on that in developing my own swing as he called it.
Well, talk about the early. You just mentioned Ted Williams, and that will get most people in the baseball world to stop what they're doing. You got to know the man. There was a time when Boston, about 10 years ago, it might have been 15, they hosted the All-Star game. And there was a moment before the game where Ted Williams, as old as he was and as fragile as he was in the he was in the dugout, and he and Tony Gwynn sat down together, and every player that was active and going to play in the All-Star game, and all of the formers, the older guys that were there for the celebration and the ceremony, wanted to be a fly on the wall listening to those two guys talk about hitting. There was a respect that is as high as you can give to somebody, and you got to know him. So talk a little bit about that, maybe that first meeting, but your understanding of how he ticks and him understanding how you tick, to where the two of you could talk about hitting freely with one another. Was that a special time for you in your life, Reggie?
Absolutely. Having been in spring training as an 18-year-old, pretty much rookies, you did everything last. And many times they would run out of batting practice pitchers because, back then the pitchers threw their bullpens and they threw batting practice to the hitters. And then if you were a rookie, maybe you would have a chance to hit against a few of those guys, but more than likely you might have to hit after coaches. But at the time, there had been talk that, Ted was going to be coming to spring training, and having heard about him and knew about him as a kid, that anxiety there of having the opportunity to see him and meet him. They said Ted was coming. But anyway, at that particular time, I didn't get a chance to take batting practice there, and the coaches had all had tee times at the golf courses there in Scottsdale, Arizona, that they were trying to make. So me being young, and at the time they said, well, if you wanna hit, go get the bag of balls and throw them up and hit them. And they were making a joke and having fun with me, but they didn't know that I used to get a bag of rocks and hit rocks behind my house in the alleyway with a broomstick, and I would do it from both sides, pretending that I was in game situations. Well, anyway, I took 2 bags of balls out, and I'm out on the field there, and I'm hitting balls. Well, Ted didn't like to go through the players' parking lot and go through the media and everything. There was another way that he could get out, come through the dugout and walk the field, and he would park his car over in the police station there behind the ballpark. So he was walking out, and he walked out, and he said to me, "What are you doing, Bush?" I said, "Well, they didn't have any batting practice pitchers today, and they told me if I wanted to throw the balls up and hit them." I said, "And I've done that a lot." He said, "Go pick up the balls and meet me at the batting cage." And I did. I picked the ball up and met him there, and he told me, "If you want to do the work, you put in the work." He says, "We'll be here. You meet me here every day." And that's what I would do after practice. I would go down to the batting cages with him and hit off of the machine, and he'd spend that time with me talking. He'd ask me questions and different things about what I knew about the work that I was doing, and sometimes my hands would be bleeding, and he told me, "Rub some dirt on it." He says, "Your blisters have to get blisters." And got to know him that way, and he gave me a mantra, and a mantra that I remember to this day. He says, "What are you going to do if you go into a slump, Bush?" And I would say, "I'm going to close my stance, decrease the angle of the bat, and go the other way." And I had to repeat it that fast. And what he would do, sometimes I'd just be walking, and he'd appear out of nowhere, and he would say, "What are you going to do if you go into a slump, Bush?" And I go, "Oh." He'd say, "You still don't know," and he'd walk away.
He'd test you every time, and it had to be quick, right? Like that, right,
Yeah,
Reggie?
if I was in the hotel and walking past him, and all of a sudden he'd pop up and he'd ask me that question. And so what I had started doing, I'm walking around repeating this mantra to myself all the time, so that if he all of a sudden came out, I could answer him that fast. And finally I did. And he would ask me things like, "How far was that pitch?" If I take a pitch, he says, "How far was that ball off the plate?" I said, "Oh, about 2 inches." He says, "Don't you know?" I said, "Well, it was about 2 inches." He said, "That ball was 3 inches outside." So in my mind, I'm saying, what difference does it make? It was outside. And then later on, he explained it to me, because I asked the right question at that time, that he says for every inch that you add around the strike zone, you effectively add 1/3 more area to it. So you go do the math and look at it and go, "Oh, wow." So he wanted you to be that precise in knowing what you were doing and understanding that, he said the good pitches are hard enough to hit, instead of you chasing bad pitches. And these are things that you're going to have to learn. And that I did. So I started being very specific as to what my hitting zone was, which is larger than the strike zone, and what the actual strike zone was. But that's how particular he was, and why I think a lot of players had trouble receiving instruction from him, because he challenged you and he expected you to challenge him, but you had to ask the right question.
Reggie, is it fair to ask that, knowing precisely whether that ball was 2 inches or 3 inches outside, could you use that with the umpire who calls a strikeout? And he goes, "Come on, Blue, that was 2 inches outside." And if you're right and the umpire knows that you're right, would Ted ever use that, or did you ever use that for your advantage when you're up at the plate and just having those quiet little mumbly type conversations with an umpire about a questionable call?
I would never say to an umpire that pitch is 2 or 3 inches outside.
Okay.
I would ask the question, how much of the plate did that ball catch?
Okay.
You see, so and there were umpires that would try to, well, he just caught the corner. I knew better, but and you knew what umpires that you can talk to in that way. Particularly the late Dutch Grenard. I used to say, Dutch, where was that pitch? And he said, Smitty, I might have missed that one.
Okay.
So and once he said, what are you going to do? Okay, now you understand, because I teach young hitters to this day that the umpire determines the strike zone. You determine your hitting zone. And if that ball is a couple inches off and he's calling it a strike, you better find a way to hit it, especially when you have two strikes on you. So you work on those things. But, again, it came down to something that, we talked about Chet Brewer there, that I learned way back then, was do not let the umpire determine the outcome of your at-bat. So that's what I endeavored to do. And when I went to the plate, I that was my plan, because that was one of the three things that I had learned from Williams. He said that to become a good hitter, there are three things that you have to do. That one, have a good plan. So that means that before I step in that batter's box, I know what the situation calls for me to do. And then I'm going to look for a pitch to give me the best chance to be successful in that at bat, to be able to execute it, because that was number two. The rules was get a good ball to hit. And number three was be quick with the bat.
Wow. Such advice for a rookie, a young kid. He called you Bush, is that right? That was like Bush League? That was
you were Bush League, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You learned that
Everyone was. It wasn't. Yeah, everyone was. We've talked about that on previous shows. Certain people have nicknames for anybody when they're just getting started. But did that help you to think differently about your career in terms of, I'm going to listen to this guy because he's out to help. He's giving me time that he's not giving to anyone else. Did you learn the value and then to take advantage of that, but not to take advantage of Ted, but use it in your favor to be help in every which way you can to get up to the bigs and to stay up there for as long as you possibly can? What was that experience like for you?
Well, I learned early on, and I learned that at home. You respect your elders, and especially those that had knowledge that could help you. So
Sure.
yes, this is something I had learned real early on, and including from Chet Brewer, and being around a lot of the old Negro League players at that time. You pay attention. You tell them, the saying used to be, he says, if there's anything you can pay attention, and that's what I did. And if Williams spoke and he said, this is what you should do, well, I wanted to play in the big leagues. I had a big league contract at 18, and I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could from the people that had been there and that could help me get there. So yes, these are things that I went through and hung on to my entire career and played the game the way that I did. I know earlier Bob and I were talking about my attitude. He said I didn't smile much on the field. Well, we learned, they said, what you see here, what you say here, what you do here, when you leave here, let it stay here. So that meant that anything that happened outside of that clubhouse and that was not on that field, I had to lock it up in my valuable box. That anything that occurred outside that. And so when I came to play, I came to prepare to win and do all of the things necessary to win. And I didn't particularly like distractions. And some of the things, and if people say, well, I had that scowl on my face, so if that was not intentional, that's just how I focus. And smiling and laughing on the field, well, my ex-wife once said to me, says, how come you don't smile? How come you don't wave and acknowledge and do some of the things that the players do to recognize? I told him, I said, let me explain something to you. I said, if I go up there and I get hit with a 95-mile-an-hour fastball in my head and I can't play and support you, I said, do you think those players are going to support you? She said, no. I said, well, that's how I prepare myself to play in a ball game and what I do. Now, when I leave that clubhouse and I go home, I don't take the game home with me. And Bob, you see, I come in, I just smile now. Well, yeah, I don't have that uniform on, so
Yeah.
you know, I get to be me, and as well, you know, one guy was a baseball player, and that's what I did. But I still had the rest of my life to live, and the things that I needed to do to fulfill that, and that's what I do today. And yes, I do smile and laugh a little more.
Well, Reggie, go ahead.
Reggie was very into that when he didn't smile. I'll tell you one thing, and I was around boxing all my whole life. I didn't want to mess with him. I'll tell you that. he was a badass looking guy when he was, you know.
I'll tell you a quick story. I think it was 1978. It was the first time I had cut my mustache off in a while, and we were playing the Phillies in the playoffs, and after the game, my brother called me in Philly and said, Reg, did you hear what Tom Seaver said? I said, no. He said, you don't look as intimidating without your mustache. I said, really? I said, Tom Seaver said that? He said, yeah. He said, you don't look as intimidating. So that that next night I went back and I got my wife's eyebrow pencil and I painted the mustache back on, and I had to really come down. I said, because here's a guy, a great pitcher, going to be a Hall of Fame pitcher, is looking at my face to say that if that's what's intimidating pitchers, well, I'm going to, whatever advantage I can get for myself, that's what I'm going to do. So that was 1978, and I haven't cut my mustache off since, but, you know.
Well,
I trimmed it up a little not to make it look so menacing.
Hey, Reggie, I wanted to ask you, what made you, were you a natural right-hander or left-hander? What made you switch hit? When did you start switch hitting? Well, switch hitters today are so rare. You don't see them.
Whatever I did on one side, I tried to do on the other. I can throw left-handed. My son is the same way. He can throw with either hand. And in high school, I used to fool around in batting practice, and now during that time, as a sophomore, I was going to run track, and the baseball coach saw me out on the track, and I was getting ready to do the high jump. I was in the high jump pin, and all of a sudden, as I'm getting ready, someone comes up and kicks me in the butt. I turn around, and it's the baseball coach. He said, you know, I heard you play baseball. I said, yeah. You know, I play, and but I'm running track. He says, well, we need a shortstop, and I'd like you to come out and try out. I said, well, Coach, you know, I said, I really want to do this. And he said, well, do you want to pass biology? Well, because he was a biology teacher, so they went over. I said, well, yeah, I do. So I went out and I had my track and everything on it. I was at a shortstop, and the shortstop that they had was Roy White.
Oh, wow.
Yes, who played 14 years. He was a senior, and I was a sophomore. So he had seen me playing Little League ball, too, as kids. But anyway, they saw me field, and as soon as they saw me throw, that was it. He says, you're in practice here tomorrow. He says, I've already spoken with the track coach. And so that's how I got into it. But anyway, and I used to fool around, but my sophomore year, I hit well over 300 just batting right-handed. Now, coming to my junior year, myself and another kid again, we used to hit left-handed in batting practice, fooling around, and its intended the fence was well, it was 400 plus feet away, and there was a street behind it in the canal, and we used to hit balls into the street that would bounce into the canal. So now the coach came up there and said, "Well, I want you to start hitting left-handed. We don't have any left-handed hitters." I said, "Well, coach, no, I haven't done it in games or anything like that." He said, "Well, you can if you feel that you don't want to do it." He says, "You can go down and practice it on JV if you want." No, I'll do it here. I want to keep playing on varsity, and I did. I wound up hitting over 400. Wow. I think 402 that year, and hit for power. And then in my senior year, as a switch hitter, I faced, of that time, the guys like Mike Kekich and, several players, and had already started to play at that time for Chet Brewer. But in my senior year, I hit 406, and I think I had maybe like only 4 or 5 singles.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, everything, I hit balls into the gap in both left center and right center down that line. Then it's a big field that we had, and it was kind of open. But but again, I am thankful too to Chet Brewer at that time, because he encouraged me to continue to switch hit. After I had been playing for him for a couple of years.
Well, Reggie, real quick, let me go back to your high school. You said that Roy White was there. There's some other really good players that you played either with or against in your league or region play. And was there a time maybe when you're hitting 400 as a junior that some of the scouts were approaching and they were talking to others, but they'd also kind of say, "Hey, keep your head up, kid. We'll be looking at." When did you know that there was a chance that you might be able to make it at the next level?
I didn't really talk to an actual scout until I was was it my junior year or senior year in high school? But there had been a scout that had been following me from the time I was 12 years old, and didn't know it at the time. It was Irv Palika.
Old major league pitcher, pitching the big leagues.
Yes. Yes. And he had seen me in the Little League All-Star sectionals playing when his son was pitching, Irv Jr., and he saw me then at 12 years old, and I did not know that he had been following me around that whole time. And ultimately, it's who I signed with. I signed with the Minnesota Twins in 1963, in December of 1960. I mean, in June of 1963 when they sent me to play. But in actual scouts, and it didn't know the scout from Boston later saw me. He thought that I was going to be a pitcher, and
Joe Stevenson.
Joe Stevenson, yes, and he saw me, just as being a pitcher, and didn't think I was going to be much as a hitter. I don't know why, but anyway, and then Jerry Gardner from Pittsburgh, because Chet, Mr. Brewer was also doing some scouting with Pittsburgh at the time, and it's how I got to meet Roberto Clemente. But there were at that time, those were the only two that really came around that I knew about. And then you had also, I'm trying to think, was it Hollywood or another guy that was with Houston? Because Houston, at the time when they were the Colt 45s, out at Dodger Stadium, and they saw me pitch. They had me throw a bullpen, and then throw from shortstop. And Grady Hatton at the time said, "I'll give this kid." At that time, he says, "I'll give this kid $25,000 right now." And at that time, if you sign for I forgot how much it was, and you had to go straight to the big leagues. So I'd have been sitting on the bench as a 17-year-old, but I said, no, I'm just a junior in high school. So I'm going to finish high school, and believe it or not, I was actually planning to go play football instead of baseball.
How about that? Wow. You mentioned Chet Brewer. I had a couple of pictures. I'll put them back up again. Talk a little bit about what his influence was on you, and were you aware of what a great pitcher that he was and the fabulous career, or is that just something that over time, I'm thinking that maybe he didn't go over it all the time, other than saying, yeah, I used to pitch, so I know a little bit about it, and I'm here to help you. What was that relationship like for you, and how did it blossom into something where he really became such an influential figure for you at that time?
Well, again, I was playing Masonic League baseball and playing on different teams at Cressy Park, which was in Compton there. And my dad, whom had played with and knew, remember the tight end Marv Fleming?
Yep.
Yeah.
Packers.
Yes. Well, Marv Fleming's dad and my dad and mother and his wife got married in a double wedding ceremony. So it was through Mr. Fleming that he knew of Chet Brewer. And when the Kansas City Monarchs, when they used to barnstorm, they would come through LA, but they didn't call themselves the Monarch, they called themselves the Royals at that time. And he told me that he wanted me to go and see this guy and watch him. So there was at South Park in LA there. They were playing a game there with these guys. They call them the semi-pros, and there were all different players from the old Negro leagues that were out there playing on Saturday and occasionally on Sundays. Well, I went there, and at the time I was 15 years old, and I'm sitting watching. So they said, okay, we want to see you hit and feel the ball. And Mr. Brewer saw me hit, and he was throwing batting practice at that time, and he saw me hit. He said, well, you come next Sunday, and I'll see if I can work you into the game. I said, okay. Well, that next Sunday, I came and sat on the bench until about, I think, the seventh inning, and he set me up to bat. He said, get a bat here, let me give you an at bat here. And I'll never forget, the third baseman saw me because I didn't really grow until my junior and senior year in high school. Saw this little guy coming up there, and he was telling me, he says, what are you doing now, Mr. Chet? He said, you signing little leaguers up here? Third baseman came in real close, and I'll never forget this. Mr. Brewer said, you better back up. And sure enough, I got pitched to me a curveball first pitch, and I took it. Then threw a fastball, and then he threw the curveball again, and I hit a shot right by this guy's head. And Mr. Brewer was there, and it went down the line for a double. And the guys, they were all looking at me, and oh wow! So now they put me out at shortstop to let me play a couple of innings, and I didn't get a ball hit to me, but when you're playing catch with the first baseman and warming up, and they saw me throw, and then the next week he told me to come, and then I don't know, Bob, if you remember the old ballpark, Ross Snyder. Snyder.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's when I got my first start to actually start in the game against for Chet Brewer. And at the time, I didn't know that they were giving my dad sometimes $10, $15 to let me play. So I was really a pro. I was really a professional at 15.
That's great. Didn't you say Chet would come and pick you up?
Yes, the times that my family had an egg business, and we would sell eggs all over the city. And I'd take them and put eggs in shoe boxes and take them to different folks' home. And sometimes, on the weekend, either I'd have to get dropped off. My dad, I'd leave the route with him and take my stuff and get paid. And other times, on Sundays, Mr. Brewer would say, "Well, Mr. Smith, I can pick him up," and he'd come to my house and pick me up, and he'd pick up other ball players too that that were around the area and that could get there, because eventually after I came and played in that first game, he started bringing other players, because then brought in Leon McFadden.
Shortstop.
Played with Houston. Then he brought in Charlie Murray, who was Eddie Murray's older brother. Then I got Don Wilson to come and pitch, and then there was Doc Ellis that came in, and eventually, when they saw Willie Crawford, and Willie Crawford with that at Fremont, and he brought in Bobby Tolan and Bob Watson.
Wow.
And then we had Walt Roberts, who actually wound up playing football. He was a kick returner for the Packers. Estes Banks also became a tight end and played football. Excuse me, one of the other kids, can't think of his name. They also played in the NFL. That was pitcher Skip Williams. And then later on, it's after we brought in even Dennis Gilbert, Go-Go, that played with us. Ron Woods played with us, and trying to get Paul Silas played with us. And at one time, we never lost a game.
Wow.
And we were playing against the Dodger rookies and some of the guys who would come back from the minor leagues that would play in the in the off season. We played things against some of the guys from the old Mexico City Reds, and we played in the league out in Maywood. Like I said, they kicked us out of that league because, like I said, we never lost.
Wow.
Bob, can you imagine how on earth could they lose? They got a list of future all-stars, both in the NFL and in Major League Baseball, all on the same team. And you're up, Reggie, you're up 15, 16, 17 years old?
Yes.
Hey, Harper, think about this. I never passed algebra, but I know baseball. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And I would say in the history of baseball, now if you look back at when I met Chet, I just thought he was a scout for the Pittsburgh Pirates when I first met him. Oh, he's a scout for the Pirates. Okay. But when the more I heard about him and his sidekick, I like characters, and Hollywood Henderson was another character. But what I saw, what they did, I don't think there's been anybody in the history of, George Genovese signed a lot of guys and this guy and that, but nobody in the history of baseball had the rock stars that Chet Brewer had, and they all loved him. I love that Reggie right now today in 2025 refers to him as Mr. Brewer. Yes. What does that tell you? But I mean, the point is, I just want to tell this one story. I told it to Reggie the other day that rocked me. It rocked me. Okay. Babe Herman was Casey Stengel when I was managing Casey. He was his neighbor in Glendale. He lived on Highland Drive, and Babe Herman had the highest batting average in the history of the Dodgers, Brooklyn. He had 393 in 1930, and he had a 324 lifetime batting average. I think 13 years in the big leagues or whatever it was. Okay, wow. Great. Okay, one day I'm sitting in his house. You know, he died in 1987, so it had to be like 1980 or somewhere in there. And I said, babe, tell me the greatest left-hander you ever faced and the greatest right-hander. Now, this rocked me. He said, Bobby, the greatest left-hander I ever faced was Wild Bill Hallahan, who played for the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, I thought he was going to tell me Carl Hubble or you know, somebody like that, or Lefty Grove or some Hall of Famer. So I looked him up, and the guy won like 110 games and lost 80 or something. He was a great, but whatever reason. And so I said, well, who was the greatest right-hander? And then I thought he was going to say Grover Cleveland Alexander or this guy or that. And he said, Chet Brewer. I said, what? This is when I said, Chet Brewer? He says, yeah. And then I looked into Chet's background. That's why Reggie still hasn't answered if he knew how great he was. So I looked, and I said, what do you mean Chet Brewer? He said, where would you have ever seen him? He said, Bobby, in the old days, they used to barnstorm in the offseason. He said, I faced Chet Brewer 12 times. May God strike me dead. This rocked me. He said, I faced him 12 times, and I never got a foul ball. And so, you know, then I said to myself, wait a minute. If you hit 324 in your career, and you tell me a black man who you faced in barnstorming is the best pitcher you ever faced, what did that tell me? It told me prior to 1947, you had two leagues. You had the Negro leagues and the Caucasian leagues, because that was one of the most shocking things I ever heard. And, you know, it just blew my mind. And then I looked into Chet Brewer, the Kansas again, Satchel Paige, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But, Reggie, you still didn't answer. Did you know when you were playing for him what a great player he was back in the day? Did you know that?
I later on learned it, how good he was, because my dad had heard of him. And
yeah.
Like I say, it was through Mr. Fleming that they knew of him. But it really resonated with me when I started to meet at 15, 16 years old. Ernie Banks, Mays, and players like Roberto Clemente, meeting them through Chet Brewer, and they all talked about how good he was.
Wow.
And then we had later on a banquet, and you started to meet a lot of the old Negro League players, and they talked about Chet, and then you realize, wow, he really was that good. You know, he really was a great pitcher. You know, you just kind of took it for granted because he had the ability to teach you all different parts of the game, including hitter. By the way, he was a good hitting pitcher.
Wow, I don't know.
At the time, and then curveball, he would show us on different pitches, and he would throw them to us in batting practice. And like I said, I think why I was able to advance through pro ball as quickly as I did, because I took a lot of those teachings. And again, you know, and with Williams and being able to process that information because of my experience with Chet, and then later on being able to, you started to find more books and stuff like that, and in talking with some of the old Negro League players, you look at his stats and you go, oh wow, yeah, and how he used to talk about matchups that he would have against Satchel Paige, and some of the other great pitchers of that day, and that time talking about him, and yeah.
Who is that? Is that Josh Gibson there with him?
Yes, I got Josh and Satchel in my slide here.
Yeah, when Josh was with the Homestead Grays.
Wow. What a great picture that is. Wow.
The reason I'm asking about this, as a 15-year-old, you just said the word exposure. If you can see a big league or a guy that used to be a big league, Negro League player throwing his best pitch, and you can say at 15, I have no idea how to hit it, but guess what? You've seen it now, and you're not afraid of it in the same way that you would be when you're seeing a 15-year-old throw a pitch that isn't even going to break anywhere close to that. Did that help you in terms of your recollection, your memory recall, and your ability to attack a baseball differently because you've gotten the chance to see some higher level information and then use it at the level that you're at to get you to the higher level? Does that make sense the way I'm asking that, Reggie?
Absolutely, Harper. That experience I wouldn't trade for anything, because it did prepare me. I was not intimidated when I saw big league pitching. All I needed to do was have the time spent being a professional at in organized baseball. Hitting wasn't the problem, and seeing pitches and the different types of pitches, I got to see all of those in the Negro, including when they threw shine balls, spit balls, and different types of pitches that these guys would throw to get you out and show you different things. I had a game that we did, and the old Negro League pitcher was showing my son. He says, on every baseball there's a soft spot. Just take this finger and hold it on that spot and just throw the ball. And it would move. And yes, to this day I can feel around and find a soft spot on baseball. But these are things that guys did. They throw a baseball out now that when he used to hit the dirt.
Yeah.
Back in the day, no, pitcher, if you did that, he'd probably strangle you when he came in, because they knew how to use those scuff marks and things like that. So I saw all of that movement. I got to face Gaylord Perry. I got to face John White. Guys that threw questionable pitches. Gaylord even threw rosin balls where he'd load his hands up. Different things. So I got to see all of that. So that kind of experience early on in my career really helped me to adjust to major league pitching just that much sooner.
You made a very interesting point, Reggie. You said I could hit, but you needed to develop. We had Tony Oliva on a couple of weeks ago, and Tony was first to admit, he goes, I had no problem hitting the ball, but I couldn't catch I couldn't catch anything. My glove, I throw my glove in the air and I drop it. And no disrespect to him, I'm just in fun. We were saying that he needed to develop. What did you need to develop when you first get to the Red Sox? What is that? 63, you're playing international ball. You're on the Toronto team in the Canadian League, and you just needed time, as you said just a second ago. What was the what were some of the things that you needed to fine tune in order for you to actually go into the clubhouse in Boston and have a real uniform and be there on opening day?
Well, that all started in spring training there, where you learn your place as a rookie, and that preparation, for that, and like I said, in the development part, I had to learn to really, and that's to be a professional, and the things that it took, how to budget my time and stay focused, how to eat properly. All of these things helped me, and more so the strategy behind the game, learning to as William said, have a plan, learning how pitchers were pitching you, how they were trying to get you out, how you were getting yourself out in your thinking and your mental approach and what was happening. All of these things, minor leagues prepared me for that. So when I finally came up to the big leagues to stay, it felt good. All of a sudden, I had a small number. Back in the day, if you had a big number, they knew whether you were going to make the ball club or not.
That's right. If you had a number with a 50 plus, chances are, unless you're Don Drysdale, you're not going to be there for very long.
Right. Well, the first number that the Red Sox gave me when I came to spring training 64 was 42. I wish now I had kept that number.
No kidding. Wow.
Because Jackie was my idol. But when you, at that time, the thing was, if you had a low number, you were going to make it. Well, when I walked into the spring training that year in the clubhouse and I had number 7, I knew I had made the ball club at that time, and from there, I knew I was ready and I had earned my spot there, and it was just a matter of getting the time, using the information and the experience that I had facing big league pitchers on a regular basis, and knowing how they adjusted to you and the adjustments that you need to make. And by the time I was in my third full year in the big leagues, I knew that I could hit there, and it's when you started my average starting to be more consistent. It started to move up to where I could be closer to 300 hitter.
It's interesting you say that, because Michael Strahan, who obviously won some Super Bowls with the New York Giants and then went on to have the Good Morning America show that he was a part of, he was asked once by a couple of pros in a podcast, how long did it take you, Michael, to where you felt comfortable and that you belonged and that you were a pro's pro? And he goes, probably 3 or 4 solid years before I was comfortable to the point where I knew what I was supposed to do and I could do it at the highest level I possibly could. And you said it was just about 3 years before your batting average just started taking up and you really belonged there at the bigs. And oddly enough, the team started getting better too. You're fighting for the pennant and you end up going in 67 to the World Series. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, real quick. It was something too that I just thought of, that Ted Williams said to me real early on. He says it's going to take between 15 and 2,500 at bats before you really figure out how to hit in the big leagues, because you'll know you fully at that time and will have had enough pitches and situations that you committed to memory, and that you trust the decision that you make in those situations. But that 67 year, it was special because Dick Williams, who was really a tough manager, and I had, oddly enough, had played with him in spring training in 1964. Yeah, when he was playing with it, and then in 65 they were going to release him out of spring training there, but they asked him to manage, and he managed at Toronto there in AAA ball there, and he won the championship there, and then the next year he won it again, and then in 67 Dick O'Connell and the Red Sox, they brought him in to manage, and Williams wanted to bring a lot of the young players that he had in the minor leagues there with him, because we knew how to play the game, and if they were going to ever have a chance of turning things around with that ball club, it was going to take the young players and the young talent that we had, because we were winning championships in the minor leagues, and that included George Scott, Joe Foy, Mike Andrews, Rico Petrocelli, the Dalton Jones, and even though Jim Gosger was there, they let Jim Gosger go, but Yaz, and then Canigaro, and then the pitching, that we started to have at that time. Williams wanted to get rid of a lot of those old players that had been there and had been part of what at that time they considered a country club, the Boston Country Club, and he had to change that whole atmosphere, that the whole approach and philosophy, and he did that. And we, as young players, at that time, we knew Dick and knew that he could be tough, but he made you play the game the right way, and that's how to learn the strategy. And again, that seriousness that was necessary, because there wasn't a whole lot of laughing around and joking going on. When he was a man, he was a serious manager, and he expected you to be serious as well.
Yeah, Bob mentioned that earlier a little bit, to where you were considered a serious player and you didn't smile a whole heck of a lot, and I see that in whatever league you're in. The part that a lot of people, you mentioned the story about your wife, and that really struck with me. Not in my bride, but in the fact that there's always somebody out there to take your job, and how you go about saving that for yourself and keeping yourself in your cleats for as long as you possibly can. There's certain things that you have to do, and sometimes people can clown around and have some fun, but there's that Tom Brady aspect every now and then, when you just got to run to the other end zone when you walk out in the field and go, let's go, or and use another word, go. You did that in your own way, and it worked for you. So I actually value that. I don't need to see you laughing, especially when you told me that I leave the game in my locker room. When I get dressed and go home, the game doesn't come with me. I become myself again. But when I'm out there, it's professional, and it is what I need to do in order to not only keep my job, but to stay at the highest level I possibly can at. So I value that, Reggie. I think it's great.
Well, think about this. The average lifespan of a major league player. Do you have any idea how long it is?
I'm thinking 3 years, the average, and that does not include the guys that don't make it the rookie year, because they're not counted in. So it's even shorter than that if you count the rookies. Go ahead.
Exactly. So that means that there is so much turnover. So as difficult as it is to make it to the major leagues,
yeah,
it's even more difficult staying. So that's why to this day I tell kids, if you think of all of the people in the world that play baseball, and you talk about playing in the major leagues, it's less than 0.5% that ever make it. Now they get there, and if you start to look at the numbers, it's about the same as to the number of players that stay more than 3 years.
Yep.
So when I see guys and players that have long careers, that meant that they did something early on and were special and did not waste that tool. So again, to be able to stay, because managers used to remind you, Ted Williams is all. I know when he was managing, I heard a guy tell him one time, he said, hey, you don't have this ball club made, because he would turn and ask you a question. Like he says, hey, what pitch was that? Or how many outs are there? What's the count again? And he'd tell you, don't look at the scoreboard. You don't have this club made. But these were little things that he would pound into us as young players, to paying attention. So that's what I did. I don't know if it was a fear of having to sit on that bench, because that was one thing I didn't want to do. So I paid attention to it, and I had to focus and concentrate in a way, and it showed in my face, because they said I had a scowl. Well, that's all that was. And I took pride in what I was doing. And if you look at the word pride and spell it PRIDE, that stood for personal responsibility in daily endeavors. So that was the approach that I took, and why I played the game the way that I did.
Hey, you know what Casey Stengel used to say? This is what he told me. People would say, oh, that guy played for the Mets and only hit 150. He was a shitty player. Casey would say, stop. They used to have a big, thick Macmillan encyclopedia. If a guy went in right field for one pitch and came out, he was in the encyclopedia. And Casey
Yeah.
would say to me, if your name is in the baseball encyclopedia for one at bat, for one pitch, you are one hell of a ball player, because thousands and thousands of people play baseball at every level. And Gene Mauch used to say the hardest thing in baseball is getting to the big leagues for one day, and what's harder than that is staying for 2 days. And I 100% agree with all that. So this guy here was there 17 years, and if you look at the 17 years, they were all, a lot of guys have 17 years and played 2 games one year or something. No, he had 17 years of quality play, which I was right. I didn't know. I was looking the other day in the encyclopedia, and Reggie, to hit 6 home runs in World Series? Are you kidding me? 6 home runs? The playoffs is one thing, but the World Series is a completely different thing. And I think that's amazing. And I honestly didn't know that you did 6 home runs until I looked it up. I went, unbelievable.
Well, I guess you can look at it as a feat. It's every little boy's dream to be able to play in a World Series. And you look at the players that never played in one. Hall of Famers, for instance, like Rod Carew, for instance, never got a chance to play.
Ernie Banks. Ernie Banks.
Yep. Ernie Banks never got to play. And so I think about that. Wow, I played in 4. Yeah. So in having that opportunity to hit a home run and even get a hit, yes, that's a special feeling to be able to do that.
Talk about your first one there in the city of Boston. It had been so long, and the Bambino curse and all that kind of stuff. And the 67 team was not expected, in my opinion, to beat the Yankees or the Orioles or the Tigers back in those days in the American League, or the Indians. What is the memory that you have of actually going through the playoffs and the World Series itself? And that I won't call it a weight, like a heavy burden, but I think the city wanted so badly for a champion, and it had to wait until 2004 to finally get one. But what was that like for you, being a part of that in such an amazing historical town that you got to play in for your first 8 years, 9 years? I just think it's fantastic. So I'd love to hear your perspective on the World Series aspect of that.
Well, that whole year, man, they called it the impossible dream year, and the expectations were that we were just going to continue to be the kind of ball club that had been there in the past, because I think we were 100-1 odds at that time to play in the World Series. But the difference was we didn't pay any attention to that, and again, Dick Williams made sure that we kept our focus on the things that we were supposed to be doing, and it was we're not going to beat ourselves. They're going to make them beat us. And we started to gel there around June, and then all of a sudden it went from where you could hear the conversations of people in the stands, especially the bookies when they were betting, what you were going to do, and then at bat, at time when you could had that few people, to all of a sudden the stands are filled, and that excitement, and you talk about that 10th player on the field, or that sixth man in a basketball game. The Boston fans became that because they came out, and that excitement motivated us to continue to win, and we were able to go on and pull it out. And it couldn't have been any more exciting, especially coming right down to the last day, and there were 3 teams. Actually, was it 3 or 4? Yeah, the Twins, the Red Sox, and Tigers were all fighting there, and it came down to the last day, and when we had to win it, and to beat the Twins to do it, and then wait for Detroit to was playing, and listening to the game on the radio and hear Dick McAuliffe hit into a double play to end the game, and it was the only double play that he had hit into all year.
Oh my God!
The excitement of that, and from that time on, we knew again that we belonged and that we could not only just compete, but we could compete to play in the World Series at that time, and that really was the beginning of Red Sox Nation.
Yeah, no kidding. Amazing. Well, we'll move forward a little bit. Red Sox decide that they're going to part ways, so to speak, in after the 73 season. In 74, 5, and 6, you go with the Cardinals. What was that like for you? Was that a tough time because, hey, they didn't want me anymore? Or is it a great opportunity for you to, quote unquote, take your talents to South Beach and try a different spot and work on your game and prolong your career?
Well, I asked for a trade, and what had happened at that time, there had been a story that Bill Russell, the basketball player, had made a statement that Boston was a racist city, and they asked me what did I think about that, and I made the statement, well, it's no more racist than any other city. And unfortunately, the headlines the next day was Smith says Boston a racist city. And, I had given the explanation of why I said that, and I had pointed out that the different areas, and from the south end to the north end to where, and being in Roxbury, West, which was a 10 square block area where most of the blacks are, I said that, hey, this is what we deal with. And although parts of that was in the body of the story, the headlines said Smith says Boston racist city. So people started doing things to me, throwing stuff at me and seeing what not too many people know, and I think I've only told the story to a small group of people. They started to come to my home, and one morning, I just happened to hear this noise down there and didn't realize that the garage door had been left over, and a guy had driven up into my driveway, because I've had a long driveway and a horseshoe. He had driven up into and was coming in the garage, and when he heard me come down, he left and started. So what started to happen when they were starting to come to my home and do little things, the police chief at the time told me, it's going to cost you about $100 a day if you want it for private security. And I said, well, I can't afford that. But he said, well, the only other thing is that we can get you is a permit to carry. And when I had to do that, and I said it's time for me to leave, so I went to Mr. York and said, hey, I'd like to be traded, somewhere else. I said that I don't want to deal with this anymore for my family. And he told me, he says, just because you want to be traded, that don't mean that we're going to do that. Is there any other thing that we can do? I told him, well, it was going to be difficult, so they made the trade to St. Louis. And you mentioned Bernie Carbo. Well, Bernie Carbo was in part of two deals that the Red Sox and the Cardinals made in December of 1973 that sent me to St. Louis that brought in what's the pitcher? Rick Wise.
Rick Wise.
And I think Bernie Carbo came in that trade, and then almost a week or two later, they made another big trade that brought in several other players that sent John Curtis and Lynn McLaughlin to St. Louis, along with another pitcher, Tatum, to St. Louis. So it was a 10-player deal that wound up, players exchanging, and how I got to St. Louis. And Mr. Yocker wrote me a real nice letter and told me at the time, he says, I think you'll be happy there in St. Louis. It was a great and franchise, historical franchise, and I got to go over and play with Bob Gibson and Lou Brock and Joe Torre and Tim McCarver and these guys that had been at the time, that they had played against most of them in the '67 World Series. And as it turned out, my game and my style of play actually was better suited for the National League. They had more African American players there that were really the stars, and you had to live up to. I'll tell you a quick story. Willie Starcher, whom I had known for a while, told me, he says, "Welcome to the Negro Leagues." That's what the NL. He said, "Welcome to the Negro League." He says,
Negro League, yeah.
Time you got over here, So yeah, and I really feel like, the gaining the experience that I did in Boston and how to play the game, that I brought with me to the National League, where it was a faster game from the standpoint of there was more base running, base stealing, and seeing that part of the game, and you had a lot of the hard throwers in the National League and players that were there that suited my game, because that if there was any one pitch that I knew that I could hit a fastball.
Well, you excelled right away, didn't you, Reggie? I mean, you were an all-star as soon as you got there in '74 and '75. So yeah, I guess the pasture was a little bit greener on the other side when you went to the National League.
Well, overall, that year, 1974, probably had one of the best years I feel, that I had in my career, because I got to play alongside with Ted Simmons, who was there and had never, Dick Schofield, but in terms of an everyday player, another switch hitter. And that year, we both hit 300.
Wow.
And hit 300 from both sides of the plate. As a matter of fact, and drove in both in 100 runs or more. I had 51 RBI left-handed and 49 right-handed.
Wow.
I had 13 home runs, I believe, left-handed, and like 10 or 12 right-handed. So in terms of balance, and we both kind of did the same thing there, and that was special. So I looked at that, and having been there and observed Lou Brock set the stolen base record, that was a special time, and again, playing alongside and becoming really good friends with Bob Gibson, and watching him near the end of his career and how he still could compete. And he was another guy who didn't smile.
No. No.
Yeah, and Tim McCarver, and like I say, Joe Torre was still playing there, and along with guys, Bake McBride, Ted Simmons.
Yep.
That was a special time, and that in the 2.5 years that I spent there in St. Louis.
Yeah, and the football Cardinals were pretty good back then also. I want to ask you a real quick question. I want to be respectful of your time, but Bob Gibson didn't give autographs. He didn't do hardly anything. He was just a tough dude. And a friend of mine got an autograph once. He had already retired, and he was sitting around in a clubhouse playing cards when my friend was a AA player with the Mets. And, he maybe have had his Bob, not Bob, but my friend had his his game pants on and a T-shirt, with the sleeves cut off. And he walked up and he goes, "Mr. Gibson, would you mind signing this ball for me, and a ball and a pen?" And Bob looked at him and didn't turn away. And he held the ball out there. "Would you mind?" And Bob was playing cards. He was in the middle of a hand with some of the old guys. And Bob reluctantly kind of took it, signed his name, and handed it back to my buddy. And my friend said, "Thank you, Mr. Gibson. You're amazing. I know you're in the middle of something. I'll go right now, but thank you. I can't tell you enough how much that means to me." And then he walks away. Every person in the clubhouse said, "How did you get Bob to do that? He won't sign anything for anybody."
Well, tell you a couple of quick stories with Bob. I say we were good friends. We used to ride to the ballpark together.
Okay.
And one day he'd drive, and then next day I'd drive. And well, on the days that he was pitching, I had to go in early, and he wouldn't speak.
Not a word, right?
Well, you might get a grunt. "Hey, how you doing, Hoot?" "Well, is that good?" "Oh, okay." So we would make the ride to the ballpark in silence, and then get out, and he'd do his thing to get ready to pitch. Another time, sometime when I'd go into Houston, I'd stay with Bob Watson, because like I said, we grew up together and playing. So
Yeah.
I'd stay at his house. So when he come to St. Louis, I did my apartment and everything. He said, "Come on, hey, spend the night and hang out with him, and we have home cooked meals." So we was going to the ballpark, and I forgot that it was Gibby's turn to drive. So I walk out, and we're waiting outside the little townhouse, actually, and waiting, standing by the curb, and I see his car come, and I go, "Oh no!" Bob Watson starts saying, "What?" I said, "Oh man!" So now Gibby pulls up, rolls the window down. He said, "Reg, I'm sorry, man." He said, "But he can't ride with us."
He can't ride with us. Oh my gosh. He wouldn't give him a ride to the ballpark.
Right. Bob is going, "Oh, no worries, Mr. Gibson, no worries." So I had to drive, but I knew I had forgotten. That's how he was, and when he was ready, he was going to pitch. Like I say, we played cards, and we would go, and he would have his white wine and place like that. He'd just sit there, and people, you knew better. People were going to come up and say, you have to tap him on and say, "Hey, I wouldn't do that."
Yeah.
And catchers wouldn't go out and talk to him, right? Wouldn't they say catchers?
Let me tell you, I heard him. I heard him tell Tim McCarver, excuse me, but he said, "Get your ass back behind the plate. The only thing you know about pitching is that it's hard to hit."
Yeah.
So now, there was a game that I was playing first base later after Timmy had left. This was like 1975, and they asked me if I could play first base. I said, "Yeah." So I'm playing first base, and Gibby's starting to struggle a little bit, and they started whistling from the bench. And Gibby is saying, "Go talk to him," and I'm going, "Mm-mm." And I go, "Mm-mm." So I put it like that. I said, "You want to tell me? You come talk to him." So Barney Schultz starts walking up the steps, and Gibby turned and looked at him, and Bernie turned around and walked back down the steps. And I looked at it, and "You wanted me to go talk to him?" So when I came in and the inning's over, I said, "Look, I'll ride with him to the ballpark, and he didn't talk to me then. Now, what am I going to go tell him about pitching to you when he told the catch?" So, But that's what kind of competitor he was. When he put that uniform on, it was all business, man. All business.
And he was a Harlem Globetrotter. How about that?
He's a great basketball player, yes, at Creighton. And when he coming out of Creighton there to play baseball. Yeah.
Well, you got to be around some great players there, and then you could join the Dodgers. Now, in '74, your first year was in St. Louis. The Dodgers end up losing to the A's, who, by the way, had 3 in a row. What an amazing team they put together. But you joined the Dodgers in 76. Talk a little bit about that. That was another trade. I think the 2 big key names were you and Joe Ferguson between the Dodgers and the Cardinals. And before you know it, you're a Los Angeles Dodger. You're wearing number 8.
Well, correct. In 1976, that first year of free agency that we had won, and coming out of spring training, where there had been the lockout for us and everything, I had not signed my contract, and the reason that I was holding out was because they wanted to cut my salary by $5,000, and I'm going, wait a minute, why do I deserve a $5,000 cut? Because I had hit 300, drove in 85, 87 runs or something like that, and they told me, well, you didn't have as good a year as you did the year before. So I don't know, wow. I said, well, actually, I had a better year, and I never forget Bing Devine said, well, how was that? I said, I did more with less. He says, well, what are you talking about? I said, Lou Brock didn't steal 118 bases. He only stole 70-something. So if you actually look at it, my run production, I produced at a much higher rate with less opportunities because I hit third in the lineup. But that being the case, and we finally get the strike, the lockout settled and everything, and we're going back to play. Well, I hadn't signed a contract for all intent and purposes. I was a free agent, and I was going to be a free agent. So they renewed my contract, which they could, and they wound up renewing it at a figure that I originally asked for. Now, because I had to sign that in spring training, sign the renewal in spring training, that for that year, when they realized that they had made a mistake on the contract, they asked me to sign for that lesser amount. And I said, no way. And so I spoken to Marvin, because at that time I was one of the player reps. I said, no, I'm not doing that. They said, that was your mistake, not mine. I signed the renewal and you renewed. So it became a matter, and I wound up. I was playing, and then I hit the wall and knocked my shoulder out of place, and I pushed it back in myself.
Oh wow!
And I started to. I kept trying to play, and every time I would swing and have a certain swing, it would pop out. And
oh boy!
Back, and what it wound up, it had torn the epiphyseal, and when I got to them, but I was struggling. I mean, I think I was only hitting like 218 in June, and they came to me because I wanted to have money set aside, deferred income.
Yeah.
Well, they had deferred income from me in the past, but over the winter, I had gotten a tax opinion done to have the money placed into an interest-bearing trust account of the money that they were holding for me in reserve, and they didn't want to do it. And August Bush said, if I do it for you, I'm going to have to do it for everyone else, and blah, blah. And so I didn't sign the contract, like I said, so I was going to be a free agent. Well, they asked me if I would accept a trade, and I said if that's what it has to be. So they gave me 2 ball clubs that were interested. One was Cincinnati, and the other was Atlanta. I talked with Bob Hausen of Wagner, who was from Cincinnati at the time, and we were talking, and so I asked a question. I said, will I have to cut my mustache off? And he said, yes. I said, well, why? He said, he said, well, that's this way. I said, well, what difference does it have? I said, I've had this, and this plate. I'd like to keep it. He said, well, you can't keep it here. So I said, so I said, thank you. And then the folks with Atlanta, and they offered me more money, and I was seriously thinking about it. So now, finally comes to the game. I'm going out to play, and I'm going to play first base in that game. And just as I was getting ready to come out, Red Shane Deans called me and says, Red, we need to meet. You need to go talk to Bing Devine, and he's in my office there. So I went in, and he told me that, hey, Al Campanis, the Dodgers called and would like to speak to you. So I said, okay, now the game starts, and fortunately they had taken me out of the lineup in time before they took the lineup card. So I spent most of the game until about almost the eighth or ninth inning, there talking with Al and negotiating with him, and the contract, what they worked out the deal with him, and eventually St. Louis wound up giving me putting the money into that interest-bearing trust account, and so I came out and sat on the bench there and wound up Red sent me up to pinch hit, and I got a base hit, and that was my last at bat with St. Louis, and
Wow.
Packed the family up, and oddly enough, they had just come into town the night before, and I had to repack the car and drive to Los Angeles.
How about that? Now, I'm not asking you to remember any of it, but was there a portion of the conversation with Al Campanis outside of the numbers and the terminology that you would have for the contract, where am I going to live? How am I, what my kids go to school, different things like that? Was there a portion of that you were just kind of he wants me, and now I want to feel like I'm a part of this organization, and I'm going to ask some different needs that I may have when I'm moving here early in the season? Is that a part of anything that you were trying to negotiate?
As far as, I just wanted to make sure, because if you were moving from your residence to another city, at the time that I was playing in St. Louis, I still had my home in Boston, my main residence there in Boston, and had a townhouse, well, in St. Louis that I leased. Well, the main thing, as far as that was concerned, and coming to LA, where they're going to make sure that I got the payment from them, that they were going to pay for the move.
Right.
From where I lived in Sharon, Massachusetts to LA. That was the main concern. I was coming home, and remember I said that Ted Turner offered the most money, and I turned that down to come home, because the one thing that I did know, that the Dodgers young players, that group that was there at that time was really talented, and the conversation with Al, he said that, we believe that you are the missing piece to make this a real championship ball club, and that's why they wanted to trade for him. And knowing at the time, Tommy Lasorda, who was the third base coach for them, I had gotten to meet and spend a little time with him, with Willie Crawford, that year, because Willie Crawford had been traded from the Dodgers also
right.
to St. Louis, and he was staying. We were staying together before my family came in, because my son was in school and my daughter was young, and they were coming to St. Louis for the summer. Well, Willie Crawford and I shared the townhouse that I was in. So he was close with Tommy, and after, when the Dodgers were coming to town, we would often go and eat, with Tommy. So I got to meet him, and he had said he had a lot of respect for me and the way I played the game. So I guess when they said there was an opportunity that he might get me. Tommy had sensational. Yes, you get that guy, and that winter when he actually when I came there, I met with Walt Olson. He had me come in and he told me, he says, Smitty, I know you know how to play this game. He says, and I like the way you play, and I'd like you to teach these young guys how to play that game. He says, I got to be honest with you. He said, they're a little different. He said, I don't really understand them, because of, they were bringing in ushering in a new approach to the Dodger way to play.
Yeah,
And
different generation, and they ended up that infield alone was the longest standing infield in Major League history.
5 years.
Yeah, and you did fit in, or at least I think so. Now, you had an injury to your shoulder, if I remember correctly. That was something that kind of slowed you down that first year. But gosh, in '77, everything started taking place in terms of you get to the World Series, even though you lose to the Yankees 2 years in a row, but you finally get that. I mean, it was a very, very – they keep talking about the Big Red Machine was the team of the '70s. Well, there wasn't that much of a difference because the Dodgers went to 4 World Series there between – 74 and 81. So they had a great organization as well. Talk a little bit about that from your perspective.
Well, yeah, I can just say, the difference I actually was that piece that was able to fill that little gap there with bringing over my experience there with the guys who were younger but were hungry. And we made up over 20 games from '76 when the Big Red Machine, because they were there in '75 and '76 and winning the World Series. And then all of a sudden, they went from the Dodgers losing and being behind by 10 games in '76 to where we were finished like 12 or 15 games in front. But that was our rivalry, and one of the things I used to talk about, when you play against the best, it should bring out the best in you. And we had all of the pieces, and that 77, 78 ball club was probably the best ball club that I ever played on.
Wow.
Better than 81? Better than 81?
Better than 81 because we had everything. Yeah, because see, in '81, I was coming off of my second surgery. In '76, that winter, I managed. Well, during that season, I went from 218 to manage. I think I finished up like around 270 something. So I was able to make a correction. But that winter, I underwent shoulder surgery from Dr. Joe there and repair surgery. And then '77, having worked hard and. Man, that was a special year for us because that was the first time we had 4 guys that hit 30 or more home runs in the history of baseball.
That was unbelievable. Unbelievable. Wasn't Dusty Baker the last of the 4?
Yes, he was. And, quick story on that, Rich Keys, who was a photographer, wanted to take a picture of the 4 guys. It was about maybe 2 or 3 days before the end of the season there, and he wanted to take a picture of the 4 guys that were going to, if Dusty would hit the home run. Ron Say had hit his, so we had 3 guys with 30, and Dusty was sitting on 29. And Dusty was really kind of reluctant to take the picture. He said, because I don't want to jinx it. So now, so Rich said, well, I'll tell you what, if it doesn't happen, he says, I won't print the picture, and that'll be in it. So Dusty agreed. So we actually took that picture before Dusty hit the 30th home run. So now we go right down to the last game. And here's something that, if you look back on, James Rodney Richards was pitching, and we never beat him. Had never beaten him. Dusty's first at bat, he comes up and he hits a ball that we're all excited, and it hits the top of the right center field fence, bounces up, and comes back into the park. And Dusty's figuring, well, that was my best chances. It's probably not going to happen. But now, let's go back the night before, okay? We're joking around. We're trying to build Dust up and everything and let him know we're pulling for him. So I go to the telephone in the clubhouse, and I call over to Houston's dugout. Clubhouse. And I said, put James Rodney on the phone. And I said, JR, Dusty, I said, we're going to make history tomorrow. I said, because Dusty said he's going to hit his 30th off of you. So Dusty there said, man, what are you doing? What you said? You're going to get me killed and everything. So now, as it turns out, Dusty eventually, maybe his third at bat or something, it comes up, and he hits the home run off of James Rodney Richards to give us the 4 guys to hit 30, and we're leading at this point in the game. So it would have been our first time beating James Rodney. Well, I forgot who it was. Was it Fergie? Somebody came up, hit a home run, tied the game up. And so we wound up still winning the game, but we never beat James Rodney.
No, it was someone else. Oh my gosh. He was amazing now. If that were Bob Gibson and you called over in the Cardinal dugout, what would have happened there? He'd have hung up the phone on you, wouldn't he?
Yeah, and I'd have never called over there. There is absolutely no way. No way I would have done that.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. Not with Bob Gibson.
There was no chance. That thought would not have even gotten into my head.
Well, I'm having a little fun with you with that one. All right, talk a little bit about there's Reggie Jackson, and everybody in New York was going Reggie, but when you came up to the plate with the Dodgers, it was Reggie. You had your own personal cheering section in a way that rivaled what he was doing because you could bring it. And the World Series, what was it like there in LA? You're going against the Yankees, and the rivalry between the coasts, between the two cities, between the two organizations, and the history that was a part of that. Did that mean anything to you, or was it just, hey, I got to play another ball game?
Well, for me, for a lot of the players on the team, for them, it meant like the Yankees and Dodgers getting back into the World Series against each other again. And I felt some of that, but I had played against the Yankees in the American League, and I got to see some of the greats, Mantle and Maris, and when before he left and went to St. Louis there, and Whitey Ford. As a matter of fact, I hit my first major league home run off of Whitey Ford.
Did you really?
Wow.
Yes, and
that is something.
Had even gotten my first official major league hit in Yankee Stadium. And so that part of it, from an intimidation standpoint, some of the guys, you were playing the Yankees. I didn't quite feel that. I was more into the Yankees-Dodgers rivalry as far as, both having been in New York and played many World Series, and it wasn't until '55 that the Dodgers finally won one against them. But I was more into that. Nonetheless, it was going to be my second World Series being in 1977, and I was really, really feeling good about it because I was at home. I grew up here in Los Angeles, and my family and mother and father, sisters, brothers, everybody was here, so I got to come home when I was in the prime of my career, and then actually getting to see me play in the World Series.
Yeah. Tickets, the demand, and then the media, everything increases to the point where a lot of guys don't know how to handle that. Was it? And Bob said at the beginning, you've hit 6 World Series home runs and really excelled when it came time and the lights were the brightest. That's not easy to do. Did other guys walk up and go, man, how are you staying so cool, calm, and collected? Because, man, I'm a nervous fit. I just don't know what to do. What was that like for you in terms of just the calmness that you were able to feel at a time where a lot of guys don't know what that's like?
Haven't had the experience of playing in one in Boston
Right.
in my first one. You realize that it's a special time, yes, but what would to me was more exciting in terms of dealing with the pressures of it. When I was with Boston, you won the league and you went straight to the World Series. Playing when I came and we were winning with the Dodgers, now all of a sudden you had to go through the playoffs. So to get to the World Series, which that the playoffs was another whole season in itself. So that was more in terms of feeling the butterflies and everything about that, knowing that what was at stake to be able to get back to the World Series. And that second one, I mean, once the World Series started, you're playing. It was almost somewhat anticlimactic because of the pressure of being able to get there, and again being in getting to play in my second World Series. So it just came down to a matter of doing the things in an effort that the way that I had done to help us get there.
Look at that shot of Reggie swing right there. If what do they say? A picture's worth 1,000 words. That is the swing.
I think I got that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it took me a while to find some that had. I want one where you're making contact, right? Or at least just maybe with just a split second after the ball is hit, you can almost see the ball coming off the bat. You get catch as catch can, Reggie. That's sometimes harder to do, but you lose that first one, then you lose the second one to the Yankees. Here in Atlanta, they gave they called it the Super Bowl hangover when the Falcons lost as badly as they did in overtime. It was overtime. It wasn't a bad loss. I mean, but they were ahead big and they lose. And how's the team going to do it? Well, you got right back on the saddle after that first one and go back again. But then you lose. And I don't want to dwell on that as much as I would imagine that the 81, even though the team you don't think was as good talent-wise or record-wise, and no disrespect the way you're saying that. I get it. I understand what you're trying to say. That was a special team, and unfortunately didn't do it. But what did it mean when you finally got a chance to win it in 81?
Well, it meant a lot because it was a culmination of, at that time, a 22-year or 20-year career. 22 years, wherever it was at the time, because I retired right after that season. But Frank Robinson talked me out of coming out of retirement. I played the next 2 years, from 1 year in San Francisco before I went to Japan.
Okay.
But yeah, that was the culmination of everything that you play the season for, and to play in a World Series. But more importantly, not only play in the World, but win a World Series and be able to wear that World Championship ring.
Well, I know the city honored it and love the fact that, we finally got one after over a decade of 3 previous appearances there in the 70s. But you just said you were going to retire right after that. Were your legs bad? Were your hips? Was it your shoulders? Was it just I want to leave while I'm on top? Was there any specific reason? Because you still had some game left in you. There was some tread on the tires, right?
Well, at the time, I was coming off of a shoulder surgery. My right shoulder had torn the labrum in the 1980 All-Star game in Dodger Stadium, making a throw. And so for pretty much the 81 season, because if you remember, there was another lockout, and that mid-season, so we had to come back. So there were 2 halves of the season, and I had not been playing. I'd just been mainly pinch hitting. So for that season, and that's what I wound up doing. So what they did, did baseball. They had the first half and the second half. The Montreal Expos had won the first half, and we won the second half. So we wound up playing each other for the game that sent us to the World Series at that time. But I was pinch hitting for that 81 season, and so therefore I actually got to share in that victory when we finally did win in New York. It was special. It was a real special feeling to know that, hey, I finally get to wear a world championship ring, and going out and say, in my mind, because of the injury, and I didn't think I'd be able to throw again from the outfield. I said, it's a great opportunity for me to watch my son play, who had started to play both football and baseball.
Well, that brings us to what are you doing now? I talked to you yesterday. I wanted to give a quick little call and just introduce myself. And I was fascinated with your academy, your ability to take basically the Chet Brewer style of I'm going to help a kid out and recycling that your own special way. You are teaching baseball. You are letting people know that there is a good way to hit, a good way to perform, a good way to be of great character and to get yourself to the next level wherever you're at. Talk a little bit about that passion that you've had for the game itself and how you are transferring that to others.
Well, fortunately, I was really blessed to have really great parents and aside from them, mentors and people that had tremendous respect for family and the respect for your elders. And one of the lessons that I learned from my parents, that especially my mom, she said the only way that you can keep a gift is that you have to share it. And the gift that was bestowed upon me was the ability to play sports, but more importantly, play baseball at the highest level that it was played. So I was thankful for that. And it was during the off season, and I can Bob again, the people that got to know me away from the ball field at the time, I actually was coaching Pop Warner football during the off season. They're sharing that time with my son, and always remembering lessons that I had learned from my parents. I told you my family had an egg business, and we sold eggs all over the city of Los Angeles. And there were times that people didn't have the money at the time to pay for the eggs that we have, and they would ask for credit. Well, one particular incident when it really resonated with me, something about my parents and the lessons that I learned. There was a lady that had gone 3 weeks and had not been able to pay for the eggs. She always got 3 dozen of eggs and owed, I think, $4.50 because we were selling eggs at that time 50 cents a dozen. And
Wait a second. I got to stop you right there. There's no way, Reggie.
True story.
The way that, yeah. If you put that in today's dollars, I'm fascinated with that. Gas was 17 cents a gallon back in the 60s or whatever it was.
So your family had chickens then, right? They had chickens?
Yeah.
No, we would go out to a ranch here out in Fullerton, places like that, where they had chickens to get the eggs, buy the eggs up, and bring back to sell.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. I'm so sorry I interrupted you. I'm so
no. It's all good. But again, it's just something I like to think about because I to this day I continue to live up to. But anyway,
Yeah.
I came back with the eggs, and my dad said, "Why you bring the eggs back?" I said, "Pops, you owe $4.50," and she said she didn't have the money. He said, "Boy, take those eggs back there and let her have them." He said, "She'll pay when she has the money." She said, she uses those eggs because she would make cakes with it, and that's how she was helping to support herself because she was a widow.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yes.
He made me take those eggs back there, and when I got back there, and he told me, that this was a lesson that I needed to learn. He says, whenever you have a chance to help someone, you do it, and you do it graciously. He said, because that's your way of answering someone else's prayer to God. Because my folks they were that you're answering someone else's prayer.
Of course.
That way,
Yes.
that's what I've endeavored to do, to take the time to give back, and in giving back, I was able to develop and start my own baseball centers at first, and then the baseball academy that I have, and one of my prerequisites to be a part of it, the kids, because baseball can be taken away from you at any time, and that is really a privilege that's afforded to you. So I said, first you have to have good grades, and your intention has to be to go to school, to continue your education. That's because that's the one thing they can never take away from you. And I've been fortunate to send well over 200 kids into college and that have not only played baseball but have gone on and are doctors and lawyers over the years to this day. And they'll come back and they'll share their experiences with younger kids who are coming up, through my academy. So it's about getting good grades. So you couldn't have less than a 3.0 GPA, because I would tell parents to take the money that they were going to pay and get them a tutor.
Yeah.
So that's what I took pride in. But at the same time, to show them that if you're disciplined enough in school, I know you're going to be disciplined in being able to play the game, because that's what it's going to take. So you had to learn how to budget your time to be able to earn that privilege to be able to play. I said, because really the only thing that you can give your parents back for being able to allow you to this privilege is love and respect. And you show respect by getting good grades, and you show the respect so that the coach, when he's looking for players, he's going to pick you because he knows two things. You're going to be a smart player, so you're going to have a good aptitude, and then you're going to have, with me, you have to have a good attitude as well. That's because if you take those two words, aptitude and attitude, and you assign a number according to the alphabet, 1 through 26, and spell out the word aptitude, it totals up to 96. If you total up the word attitude, it totals up to 100. So I tell kids that, those two things, if you have good aptitude, it shows your ability to apply an instruction, and I can trust you when the game's on the line. And your attitude, how you go about accepting that and doing the things that you need to be able to do to contribute to the team, which is everyone achieves more.
Right.
So that's what my academy is about, and I've been fortunate to be able to continue to learn things and take advantage of the technology that's available today to produce not only good ball players but good people.
Well, it's interesting that your biology teacher said if you want to get an A, or if you want to pass, you better come play baseball. And I'm not saying it's not okay to play video games or whatever, but you better focus on the things that you need to. Get your school grades up and come out here and play baseball as hard as you can. You can have other things, but you'll start to realize that those become less important because they're not helping you reach a goal that you're setting for yourself. So you're setting the parameters very early. Do a couple of things, and then you can learn under me. I'll be glad to teach you. Is that kind of the way? I mean, I'm not saying anything that you would say, but how a parent would say. I'm telling you what, my kid is focused, my kid is determined, and he has a completely different attitude because of what Reggie's doing with him. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, it is, because see that is the one thing, with parents. We have to support each other.
Yeah.
I'm going to support you in making sure that your kid understands or learn what his purpose is in life. You have to have a purpose to achieve a goal. So to help them understand that, and the things that the parents are paying for and hoping for their kids, and that's providing them food and shelter, clothes, and education. Those things. So I feel that I'm helping to support them, and I want the parents to support me from the standpoint, not so much from the financial standpoint, but allowing me to be able to spend that time and share that information with the kids. So I always let the parents know how thankful I am that they allow me to do that. And when they see that and we have that connection, I think it helps to build a better person, where he can be more productive as in society. So yes, to be able to work with me, that's on these are my standards that you're expected to meet, and I don't compromise them.
Well, and in truth, just speaking plainly, your parent, any parent, wants you to be given not only a chance at something, but to be given a chance to be successful at something. Help prepare my kid, whether that be math or music or the arts or medicine or even politics. And you're exposing kids to some of the intricacies of the game and how to hit and how to play better, hopefully, than what other people are doing. And they're going to get a chance. They're going to be playing in these games, and I want them to excel. That's your motivation. And theirs is, thank you. I want my kid to have that chance, and I think Reggie would be just the right person to be able to let him experience that with. Correct?
Hey, Harp, I want to say something.
Please, Bob, go right ahead. I'm sorry.
I want to just say this. This interview has been unbelievable. But you know what? What rocked me more than anything I've heard was the egg story with your dad, with the lady.
Yep.
That was making cakes. That rocked me. I want to tell you that, because that's a lot to do with why you're here right now, being Reggie Smith. I mean, what amazing story that was. So thank you for sharing that. I will never forget that. And I'm going to pass it on to other people, because what a story. What a story. Thank you, Reggie.
Oh, my pleasure. Like I said, I'm glad to do the interview because it reminds me that teaching kids the difference between being and doing. Baseball is what I did, but I'm not a human doing. I'm a human being, and to be that, you take those lessons that you've learned along the way, and my parents and my dad shared that with me. Bob, you said how it touched you. Well, it had the same effect on me because I never forgot it and realized the importance of it. And you do these things not because you have to. You do them because you want to, and giving rather than always wanting to receive. It truly is a good feeling to be able to do that, to know that I'm doing something, hopefully in a positive way, that influences a kid to, one, if he has the ability to share and be able to play this little boy's game that we call baseball, but more importantly, give back. This is what you do. Let's just keep the circle here, the family, knowing where, if anything, you're known for being a productive member of society.
Absolutely. And Reggie, what a great way. We'll wrap this up now with a biology teacher kind of standing behind you and going, no. I want you to, I've heard about you. Roy White has said some things about you. For Ted Williams to notice that you're hitting balls that you're literally tossing up to yourself and saying, hey, kid, I'm going to help you out. For Chet Brewer saying, I'll work with you and I'll pick you up on Sundays when you need to. There's been so many great people that have been influences in your life, and it certainly was a productive business that you careered. 7 times you're an all-star. You're a World Series champion. You played in 4 World Series. You are a Gold Glove winner. You're in the Red Sox Hall of Fame. You should be in the Dodger Hall of Fame. And with your 281 average and your 2,000 hits, 314 home runs.
287. 287.
Go ahead, Bob.
287, not 281.
I'm sorry, you're correct. I apologize. 287. And that is a difference maker. Absolutely. So, Reggie, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. Do you have any business? Like, is there a tryout that you have coming up for kids, or is there anything that you're doing? Do you have a fundraiser, a golf event, or anything that we can talk about, or at least share and let some of your fans know a little bit more about what you're up to?
Well, I don't have golf tournaments. I'm kind of semi-retired, but I do go into the academy, and my instructors and people that are there, they're running little travel teams, but anytime, for consultation or anything like that, they can just reach out to the Reggie Smith Baseball Centers or Foundation there and just submit.
It's in the San Fernando Valley. Do you have a website, Reggie?
It's Reggie Smith Baseball Centers.
Okay.
And they can reach me there, and it's in Encino, California, here, and my facility is at the Encino Little League facility there as well. There, so if you want to reach out, I'm there.
Bob, final words.
I got to say, this may be one of the best 2 hours that I've ever spent. I'm serious. I'm dead serious. I learned so much. How about this? I never knew there's a soft spot in a baseball, and I've been around the game my whole life and managed Warren Spahn for a while. I never heard that until today from an outfielder. So anyway, but Chet Brewer.
I was looking at this ball, Bob, and I'm going, gosh, I wonder, there's a little spot right there. I'm trying to figure out. It's a little too late for me, Reggie. At 62, yeah. I'm not going to be able to throw anymore.
Yeah,
but at least I know to share that with somebody else. So thank you.
Hey, Reggie, I got to tell you this: I love you. I really do. I love you, and I love what you said.
I appreciate that. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Wow, I didn't realize 2 hours had passed, and this was special because it gave me a chance to share some stories, and still had a bunch more, but to share and get these things out to and I talk with my players and share some of them all the time, but this was a special time for me, and thank you so much for the invitation to be on your podcast here.
Well, we certainly appreciate it. Every now and then we get a champion's champion, and you certainly flip the bill for that. Thank you so much. Reggie Smith, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, a 7-time All-Star, World Series champion. He played in 4 World Series. As Bob said, he hit 6 home runs in his World Series appearances. Great major leaguer, a pro's pro in so many different ways. And then also you can go to the Reggie Smith Foundation and the academy that he has there in Encino, California, to learn more about not only how he teaches the game, but how he might be able to help your youngster be a better athlete. We appreciate you being a part of the show as well. On behalf of 100 Yards of Football, I want to say thank you for tuning in and being a part of the sports page with Bob Case. In any respect at all, we thank Reggie for being here, and Bob, obviously, thanks to you. And this is Harper LaBelle saying, have a